Hello guys, how are we doing and welcome back to the channel. As you're probably all fully aware of, there has been a change to the Jackal PDW within Black Ops 6 Ranked Play, and you can no longer use the attachments you had available a couple of weeks ago. This follows the CDL rule set where they GA'd or had a gentleman's agreement in to ban all barrels other than the gain twist, all muzzles and all fire mods, because they believed that the balancing between the AR and the sub was a little bit lopsided towards the sub machine gun. Now before we get into this video, first of all I want to hear from you guys. Do you think we should be seeing every single GA in the league represented in ranked play? Personally, I don't think it's quite necessary. I think leave out the overpowered guns and other bits like that, and take out flashes, which is still to be done, but leave stuff like this out because people still want a little bit of variety in what they're playing. So the old setup probably looked a little bit similar to this. Okay, you had a muzzle, you had a maybe a long barrel to boost that damage range out, and then the other three are pretty standard. And now you're probably seeing setups that look a little bit similar to this. So the gain twist barrel is almost forced. You can choose to take it off, but it's better with it, obviously. And then obviously they have the Ranger, Ergonomic, and Infiltrator SOC probably as normal. Some people do prefer slightly different attachments on these three, but give or take, it's pretty much the same sort of thing. Now, there's three things we're going to be covering when we're looking at how good a gun is and what you should consider when determining what's overpowered or what the new meta is and things like that. The mobility and handling is one of them. So how the gun moves, how the gun feels, how quick you can move with it, how fast you can slide and stuff like that. All of those things fall into that category. You've then got recoil patterns, so how easy it is to shoot at longer ranges or medium ranges to peel people off head glitches and things like that. And then finally, the effective range. So how good can it kill and how quickly can it kill an enemy at certain distances? And they're things we're going to be covering in today's video. Before we get into all of the details and all the depths, these are the class setups I've used in these tests. So the new Jackal obviously is the gain twist Ranger, Ergonomic, Infiltrator. The old Jackal looked a little bit different, as we've already seen. So you have a compensator and a long barrel for that extra damage range instead of the gain twist. And then the other subs pretty much all follow suit. So you've pretty much got a compensator of some sort, the long barrel, Ranger, Ergonomic rear grip, and then some sort of stock. The only differences are the PP919 has a fast mag instead of one of the attachments, and the compact you have to use a vertical or recoil, otherwise the recoil pattern is just too hard to control, and this at least brings it in line. And then obviously I've got this for the comparison, but the AMAZ is in there because obviously you want to see how the AR stacks up against the new Jackal and things like that. So this is my AMAZ class, and I've actually used a really overpowered class that uses all 7 attachments. So this is going to be a real good comparison to see how it would stack up against even the best AMAZ setup, which uses Gunfighter. So yeah, your setups may differ slightly, but in order for the test, I think this is fairly fair. These are probably likely setups, or if they're slightly different, they're going to be a minor change. But they're the setups we're using in the test, and that's what we are comparing against. So first of all, let's take a look at mobility and handling. So you've got categories down here, so movement speed, crouch movement speed, all of these things that all sort of fall into this mobility and handling category. You've got all of the statistics on the left of each gun, and then you've got a score out of 10. So 0 means it's absolutely the worst in that category out of these guns. Obviously the GPR is not in here, but out of these guns it's the absolute worst in the category. And a 10 means it's the best in that category. So let's take, for example, the Jackal and look at ADS speed. So the Jackal's got a 65 millisecond ADS speed, which is quickest out of every single one here, or joint, I guess. So it's given a 10 out of 10 rating. You can see, similarly, the old Jackal was also a 10 out of 10 rating, but the further higher it is, the lower that rating gets. So the worst one in class is the AMAZ, obviously, because it's the AR. It has an ADS speed of 220, so it gives it a score of 0. So 0 literally means worst in class. Now you will notice there's one statistic where the AMAZ isn't the worst, and it's the ADS movement speed, and that's the help with the Infiltrator stock I have on it. The compact's ADS movement speed, because it doesn't have that stock, because you need that extra recoil help, makes the compact the worst at that ADS movement speed in class, slowly or slightly followed behind the AMAZ. So anyway, you can take a look at this. This basically scores it against each other. So 5 is pretty much bang average, 10 is really good, 0 is really poor, and then you get an overall mobility score at the bottom. Okay, so how does this stack up against each other? So Jackal is by far, and you've seen the attachments are relatively similar. Obviously the compact is a little different because you need stuff to compensate for that really high recoil. But the Jackal is clearly miles ahead of its class. It's got by far the best mobility, enabling you to get around the map better, react quicker, sprint to fire time, and you're not going to get caught out as much with the Jackal than you would the C9, the PP919, the compact, and obviously the Harrz, which is an AR, so it does belong here. Now, I think this relationship is okay. I think this subs should have better mobility and handling than the AR because that suits its playstyle, and it's one of the benefits of using a submachine gun over the AR. So I'm happy with how this looks. I think this is a relatively fair thing. Now, people are wondering, what's the new meta? Is the C9 the new sub to use? And going by the first thing we're looking at, which is mobility, no. The C9 is miles behind the Jackal when it comes to mobility and handling, and sits further in line with the PP919, which is renowned for a little bit of a slower mobility and handling gun. So if you were only to look at mobility, and mobility is what matters for you, you would say the Jackal, by far, the best sub in class, and the best gun probably in ranked play so far to date. Now, moving on to recoil, we've obviously got the different versions. So the old Jackal's the Jackal with the old attachments, the new Jackal's the Jackal with the new attachments, and then you've got the C9, all using that setup I showed you a couple of minutes ago. Now, when you look at recoil, you've got two factors to consider. How wide is the recoil pattern from the furthest left point to the furthest right? And that is helped by that's horizontal recoil. And then you've got how tall is your spread, which is vertical recoil. Now, on the old Jackal, you were able to use a muzzle, which was often a compensator, a ported compensator, or something like that, and that basically benefited your vertical recoil, which means that you didn't have to pull down your right stick as much to bring it closer in. Okay, so this displays basically. These are basically the same, but this one's just a little bit stretched because it doesn't have that vertical recoil muzzle attachment on it anymore. The width, it looks worse in the old Jackal, like the horizontal recoil, because it does take a quite quick step right, but that's only simply because it's a little bit more of a squished down version than the new Jackal because of that vertical recoil, but the width is generally the same. Overall, horizontal is pretty much bang on, but the Jackal, you just have to now pull it down very slightly, but it's still not bad. It's still very, very usable. It's fairly easy to understand. The first 10 bullets or so are relatively straight up. It then goes right for the next 12 or so, and then for the remainder of the mag, it goes pretty much back up to its normal pattern. So as long as you're killing in those first 10 bullets, you're looking pretty good. The C9, on the other hand, another fault of the C9, in my opinion, is how bad the recoil pattern is. So if you can kill within those first few bullets, great. There's not much change there, but then you can see it takes a drastic change in horizontal recoil to the right before continuing its pattern. So it's a little bit more of a drastic version of the Jackal, and although you probably don't have to pull down as much because there's less vertical recoil, because this recoil pattern isn't as tall, controlling horizontal is far harder to control than vertical recoil control. So for me, the new Jackal outperforms the C9 in that category. PP919 has very, very low recoil as long as you're shooting and stop and then starting again before you get to that 20 or 22 bullets used, because otherwise it goes straight to the right. You're going to be pretty safe. But other than that, before you get to that point, the recoil is very, very easy to use, and I must say it's the best recoil pattern in class for the SMG. You then have the compact, which, although we've got a bunch of attachments, we've got the recoil springs, we've got the vertical foregrip, although we've got those attachments to help compensate for recoil, it's still bloody awful. You can see there's some big jumps in the bullets from the first few, and that's really what you want to try and avoid, okay? So, yeah, the compact really struggles with those longer ranges, peeling people off headies, and that's why it's typically not been used so much to date. And then obviously you've got the Harrz, which, because it's an AR, has got a really, really tight recoil pattern. It's fairly easy to use, fairly easy to manage, but that's one of the benefits of using an AR over an SMG. So I don't think the jump from the old to the new Jackal is drastic too much. As I say, the horizontal recoil will not have changed. It's purely the vertical that will be different, which means all you need to do is pull slightly more down on your right stick than you would have before. And I personally prefer, other than the PP919, the new Jackal and the new setup Jackal is still got, in my opinion, the second best recoil pattern out of the SMGs. It's fairly vertical, it's fairly straight up vertical as well, and you can definitely still peel people off head glitches, and it gives you've got a little bit of a spray option, whereas the C9, it's completely awful if when it gets to this stage of the recoil pattern. The compact is bloody awful anyway. So yeah, I don't think the Jackal has been nerfed too badly in the recoil department. We're now going to look at the time to kill. Now, I've put a little bit of an overlay of Hacienda here, You've got the garage on the left. You've got P4 rock here. You've got open here. Just to give us an idea of how far these distances actually are. So looking at the graph itself, along the top, along this left-hand side here, you've got how quickly does it kill. And the further down the line is, the quicker it kills. And then you have the range at the bottom. So in-game, this is literally 50 meters as well. So this is perfect to that. So from Checkers, I guess, from the front of Checkers or so to this main stand, or to this first box, is pretty much 10 meters. And then it's 5 meters wide almost. And then, yeah, pretty much. So essentially from mid Checkers, the rock is about 20 meters or so out, okay? So what can we see? So generally speaking, you're going to notice the change in distance. So the time to kill is pretty much the same, but in the old Jackal, you had a few more meters at every stage, a little bit further, where you'd still be able to kill at that range. So at the very close range, within 20 meters or so, you can kill at 300-ish, 270-ish milliseconds. Whereas now you can only get that fast time to kill up to 17. So there's like a 3 meter gap there where you probably would have got the kill within that short time frame that you no longer do. And that's about the width of the rock heady, for example, or even less than that. This gap here is about the width of the rock heady. So realistically, the buff, and when it gets past 26 meters or so, you're probably not going to be wanting to use the Jackal, or it's not going to be effective generally anyway. So the only difference in the time to kill at range is probably the length of this heady, okay? So it's not massive, it's not as drastic as people think. It will be a slight change, but up to 17 and a bit meters, 17 and a half meters, it is no different, okay? So as long as you're taking the same gun points on, you will not notice a single change. Now, the only thing that does the biggest stretch, the biggest change is this big box here, where before, you used to be able to kill in about 440 milliseconds all the way up to 39-ish meters or so. That time to kill is now only limited to 32 meters. So there's about a 7 meter differential there at that really long range. But of course, you're probably not taking on those gunfights, and the sort of distance you'd need to be for those gunfights is bloody insane. So it's a small change. That's what I'm saying. I'm trying to get to the point that the Jackal distance and the fact that you have to use the gain twist over the long barrel is barely different. Interestingly, because the gain twist barrel has better velocity, you have a longer hit scan range. So with the bullet velocity barrel, the gain twist barrel, you have a 38 meter hit scan range, which carries you all the way out to about here. Whereas on the old setup, because you didn't have that bullet velocity benefit from the barrel, you only had a 27 meter bullet velocity hit scan range. So anything past 27 meters with the new Jackal, with the old setup, sorry, you'd have had to lead your shots. You'd have felt like you had bad hit detection. Whereas with the new Jackal, you're going to get hit scan all the way up to about 30 meters. Now let's take a look at all the comparisons between the SMGs that are currently in ranked play now, including both the new Jackal and the old Jackal. So we're just for sensibility, just so you guys can locate how long this distance is in your head. The starting point here is the diving board on the pool in Vault. Now up to about 13 meters or so, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yeah, 13-ish meters or so. There's too many steps in there. The compact is the fastest killing SMG. But because we've seen that the mobility is really poor, the recoil pattern isn't that great, you're probably not going to want to use it. That probably outweighs the time to kill unless you're really, really in those tight range engagements. Now, between the 13 or so to 20 meter mark, the C9 actually takes a stand at the fastest killing SMG. And if you took the compact completely out, if the compact was an absolute write-off for you because it's really slow, really immobile, and had a really bad recoil pattern, you would say that C9 is the SMG of choice all the way up to 20 meters, where it kills a lot quicker. Now you can see here that the Jackal and the old Jackal are pretty much just very, very slightly behind the C9, and you could argue the change and the difference in ADS speed and the difference in sprint to fire speed will negate this tiny benefit. So the fact that you can be more mobile with the Jackal and you can be more maneuverable with the Jackals means that you could probably still prefer that over the C9. So it's really about that balance. But now what you have, the option of using the C9 up to 20 meters, but that's no different to what it was before. If you look at the old Jackal, which is this deep red line here, that the C9 was still the fastest killing sub up to like 21 meters or so. So it's not really that different. The nerf really hasn't affected the fact that the C9 is better at that range. That's no different to how it was before. The only thing that looks different when you get past this range, obviously you got to bear in mind that the new Jackal has got a 10 meter longer hit scan range than the C9. But yeah, generally speaking, what I'm trying to get across here is that the change in the GA of the barrel and the muzzle hasn't really affected this much at all. The C9 is still the fastest killing sub, all the way up to about 20 meters, and even the old setup Jackal, this red line, never really was first place anyway. So there was always a better, faster killing option with the subs, whether it's the compact, the C9, maybe the PP919 a little bit. It was never the fastest killing anyway, so it's still, that's probably not the reason you were using the Jackal. It probably was for that mobility and easy to control recoil. Back to Hacienda. Now, how does the GA to Jackal stack up to the Harrz? So let's take this example here. Pretty much lines up your player with the entry to the garage, and up to about 17 meters or so, 16 or 17 meters or so, the Jackal is going to kill quicker than the Harrz. Okay, now obviously these values are without any headshot multiplier or anything like that. This is just if you're shooting your body, the Jackal is going to kill quicker up to about 17 meters or so. After that, the Harrz wipes the floor. Okay, any challenge between the new Jackal and the Harrz after 17 meters, the Harrz will win. Now, the question to you guys, and the question I've pondering about is that correct? Should an SMG have a little bit more range? Should the meta SMG have a little bit more range than that? Or do we feel like 17 meters, a gunfight within 17 meters, you're silly if you're challenging an Harrz anything longer than that? Now, if you were in the front of garage here, you would only beat an Harrz if they were past or in front of this wooden block thing, which isn't that far realistically. Now, personally, I think a sub player should have to take certain routes. They would need to prove that they work well with their covering AR, and the AR should guide them to longer lines of sight and longer corridors. So I don't feel like this is too much of enough. The submachine gun players in this game will now have to play like submachine gun players. Okay, there's no ego challenge the Harrz from distance. There's no trying to take long range routes. You've got to be a lot more careful and a lot more considerate where you're pushing and how you're pushing it with the sub than you did before. Now, as I say, the range before would have been only slightly a little bit further out. I think it was about 20 meters or so it bumped out. So it wouldn't have been too different anyway. But let's see how it all stacks up together. So we're back on Vault. We've got the starting position or the shooting position of this Jeep, which is out just outside of P4. Obviously, you've got the pool over here. Now, I've put the Harrz in just to compare against all of the rest of the SMGs. And obviously, it tells a similar story. Compact, C9, and then the other subs. Now, obviously, I've just said the Jackal is, if we go back quickly, the Jackal, the Harrz will be better or faster killing than the Jackal about 17 meters. If you look at the fastest killing AR, or the longest range SMG, sorry, is the PP919. That will actually kill quicker than the Harrz at all ranges up to 25 meters, which means so it's from the Jeep all the way up to this sort of palm tree heady sort of place. That's about 25 meters. And that, if you were using the PP919 and you hit all your shots within that range, you would kill quicker than the Harrz. Now, I don't mind that because the PP919 has got really poor mobility, and it's not really a favored gun because of that. Okay, it's not great because of that. It also has a much slower time to kill at the closer ranges, so it's slower than the old and new Jackal, it's slower than the compact, it's slower than the C9. That's probably why you wouldn't fare to use that. So I think this is fairly balanced. Now, the question we're all asking here, has the Jackal GA that we've now got in ranked play nerfed into the ground? And I personally don't think it does. It still stacks up really, really strongly against its competitors. It stacks up really strongly from a movement perspective. The recoil pattern's really good, and it's going to be map dependent. Do you feel like you can work around those tighter corridors than you would normally with the new Jackal, or do you feel like the map's got a little bit longer line of sight, in which case you'd maybe use the C9? But yeah, I don't think it's nerfed into the ground. It's 100% still usable. I will not be surprised if the Jackal is still the meta SMG to use, but I feel like this slight drawback in distance every so often is going to make it so that you've got to be a lot more careful in the gunfights you're taking. And the fact that there's a reaction to it currently is just telling me that people need to play a little bit smarter with the sub. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts as always, and I will see you guys in the next one. Ciao for now.